Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another. The week just flies by. It's another episode of the Snap No Tap podcast. I'm Tony Cecchine, along with the living legend, the one and only, in his words, the greatest human being that ever lived, Joe Cardinal. We have a very special guest that we'll get to in a minute that I'm going to do the introductions for, because Joe's getting too good at that stuff. How you been, Joe?
Doing okay, man. Busy with school, work, the usual, tired from workouts. So an old man complaint, but otherwise I cannot complain. How are you?
Okay, what are you learning in school?
Well, I'm doing the anatomy and physiology class, which given me a newfound respect for anybody who works in healthcare, because this class is kicking my ass. I am getting through it, but I don't know how. I kind of picture it as like, you ever seen someone who is stumbling and falling, and the only way they can stay up is by continuing to move? Like they just keep kind of running to like catch their feet, because I feel like if I don't keep moving forward.
I do that every single day of my life, Joe.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically that's what I'm going through. It just the volume of terms and kind of concepts. I'm really not quite sure. By the time we're quizzing on one, I'm already behind on the next topic. So it is quite intimidating. And so it's interesting to compare it, because obviously I work in IT, and I think this is harder than any IT class I've ever taken. Just a sheer volume and memorization and things like that. But it's also fascinating. I mean, even if I completely bomb out in the class, I'm learning about, how the body works, a lot of nuances and things that I had like vague ideas about things. But it's honing that in. So it's not going to be a waste either way. I recommend it for anybody who's got the time or the inclination. And luckily I've got a very cool and entertaining teacher too. So he makes it interesting to go there. But just I have a lot of I'm going back to like high school test anxieties with this thing, but I'm getting there. So only, goddamn, what is it? 9 more weeks or some shit like that. So
maybe you ought to come to my surgery, and they could always use an extra helping hand. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I think I should start giving you medical advice. I think that's the next step after this. Pretty sure.
You may know just as much by the time you're done with that class. I don't know. I shouldn't say that, but now it may not be just a simple laparoscopy. It may be an open surgery now. They won't know until they get into this. So I don't know what's cooking, but it's a week from this Tuesday. So it's like March 8th. So it's roughly a week away. I just want it over with. Or is that March 7th? I got to look now. Wait a second. I got to look on my computer. Yeah, that's March 7th, Tuesday, March 7th. But yeah, good luck with that. I went through all of that. I studied a lot of anatomy and physiology when I was young, just to help me with my fighting. As you've seen some of my wall charts and everything downstairs. You lose it. You lose hey, I still know where to hit and all of that jazz. I may forget some of the theoretical names, but I put my own little token names on them, so it helps me remember. Like if I hit somebody, in the xiphoid process, I don't even think of the xiphoid process anymore. I say like 78th and St. Clair, because that's where I use it on somebody, and the reaction was very good. And, or 70, 29th, 2900 block, Elmwood Park, 72nd Court, that's where him and I used to live. So, but anyway, quick, give us an update on when I'm doing my seminars, because there's been one change out of the 2 seminars.
But before we go any further, before I forget, I want to say, when you do have your surgery, if they give you any of the parts left over, if you could give them to me as like show and tell for the class, that would be appreciated. So keep that in mind. Maybe ask the doctors if anything they take out.
Well, I got a bunch of apples. I think it would help by giving your teacher an apple. I mean, it always worked for me.
I'll try that as well. But like I said, yeah, any bits and parts that they no longer need for you, pass them on for science, Tony. Really contribute.
I'm not getting a vasectomy over here, okay? I mean, I know that's what you're leading up to. You're not getting it. But all right, I'll do what I can. Jeez, man, give. I mean, what am I, the Red Cross? I mean, come on.
All right. Well, yes, workshops. So DuPage Krav Maga is going to be Sunday, the 19th of March at 10 a.m. So that's our normal third Sunday of the month there. This changes at Jason Bender's Martial Art and Fitness. We'll be doing that on Saturday, the 25th at 1:30 p.m. from 1:30 to 3:30. If you can't make those, please consider hitting Tony's website, catchwrestle.com. All the links will be below if you're looking at our YouTube video. You can do digital downloads. That's always helpful if you can buy those things, or join our monthly membership. 2 levels, $10 where you get additional video content that is not available elsewhere, or the $5 a month thank you, showing appreciation for the podcast and all the free videos on YouTube. What else have we got? I think that
Private
covers
training.
all.
The
Well,
3-5
absolutely.
day tri-C thing.
Private training. So again, check out Tony's website, catchwrestle.com, the original Catch Wrestling website, and sign up to get personal training with Tony. Yeah, and click the like buttons, click subscribe. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform, give us a big, positive 5-star review. All those things help us. And thanks for all the kind comments on YouTube. Thanks again.
Well, I guess we should get to this. I've never, how like when you look to either buy a house or you move into a new neighborhood and you wonder, well, I just hope this is going to be a nice neighborhood. I hope there's not going to be a problem. I hope I get along with the neighbors and things like that. Well, I don't know, 17 years ago, something like that. It's been a long, long time. I moved into a new neighborhood. And the worst nightmare that you could ever imagine happened. Our upcoming guest today turned out to be my next door neighbor, my exact next door neighbor. And I got to tell you, and especially when you move next door to a law enforcement agent, oh my goodness, no more topless parties at my house on my back porch. I'll tell you that. But I got to admit, we're at a unique moment here, because I got my 2 closest friends on this podcast, Joe and our upcoming guest, Dan Nadolski, a sensational, wonderful martial artist, absolute cream of the crop. He'll talk about that. Retired Cook County Sheriff, 30 years. He'll get into all of that. And just a great father, great guy all the way around. Wonderful. Him and I have been through a lot together. A lot of good, a lot of bad. And I have to think, but I believe now, since Kevin's death, that Dan is the longest, probably the longest friend that I've had now in Chicago, because all my friends that I knew before I knew Dan, they've sadly passed on. And I think I met Vince after I met you. But anyway, without further ado, let's welcome the best. That's all I can tell you. Dan Nadolski, welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Cool.
Yeah, so he's a very talkative guy. We'll never shut him up. Joe, ask questions, because I'm going to clobber him soon.
Hey, Dan, so where did you grow up? Were you growing up around the Chicago area?
Yep. I was born in Chicago, grew up in Chicago, pretty much the north side. I grew up in Ravenswood area. And then when I got married,
nice.
my first wife, I moved to Rogers Park.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Ravenswood's a great area. That's really nice. Yeah, if I could, and now it's probably like crazy out of my price range, but that would be one of the areas I would pick to go and hang out at or live. I love all the little bungalows there and stuff. Great area in Chicago.
Yeah, it's a big yuppie area. The house that I lived in, they tore it down and built a new one, which I'm sure they charged an outrageous amount for. I have no idea, but it was expensive.
Yeah, I kind of hate that. And a lot of them, you got these classic Chicago bungalows and brick, and they'll tear them down and build these big monstrosities in there. you know, because obviously they had the money to or whatever, but it's a real shame. A lot of the character of the city is kind of being taken away by that. I mean, I guess that's gentrification and everybody bitches about that, but it's, you know, I don't have a problem if you're gonna, you know, but restore it. If you've got access, you have the money and the means to have these classic old Chicago buildings, you know, keep them up, make them nice. It's a piece of history. You know, I love those old buildings, but unfortunately, a lot of these people come from out of town or from the burbs. They're not used to that. You know, maybe they don't have the same connection to the city that like I had. But yeah, that's unfortunate when they tear down a lot of the old places and yeah, just build some big monstrosity on this, you know, place. But that's really cool because you're right by the river there. You've got easy access to the Ravenswood train line, which is now the Brown line, but I always know it's
Mhm.
Raven. I'm that old. Yeah, I kind of grew up like maybe 10 blocks south of that. So kind of by California Park, if you know where that is.
California and what?
Well, the park is California. So picture like Gordon Tech High School. You know where that is? That was my
Yeah.
neighborhood basically. So
Oh,
not too
okay.
far. Yeah, not too far at all.
Mhm.
So that's cool. So you where did you go to high school?
St. Benedict.
Same thing. Okay, yeah, I had a lot of buddies who went there. That's cool.
Yeah, I went, and at grammar school, I went to St. Matthias.
St. Matthias. Um, now were you into sports growing up?
No, not really. I wasn't, I mean, I played sports like everybody else, but I never was on the team sports, like in high school or anything.
Nothing organized, just like pickup kind of stuff?
No, yeah, right. One of the main reasons, because when in high school, all I was interested in was either playing hockey or football, and they didn't have either one of those at school. I didn't want to play, didn't want to play basketball or baseball. And sorry to say, Tony, but when I was young, I used to think that wrestling was very gay.
They all did. Everybody
There's a
did.
fine line, that's for sure.
I've learned in time, and a little bit too late, unfortunately.
You know, to interject, a lot of the martial art guests that we've had on, many of them did not come from an athletic background as far as team sports or anything. Do you notice that, Joe?
That's for sure. Yeah. And a lot of times it like, I don't know if it's what it is about that. If it's kind of like, you know, until they find the martial arts, something that's a little bit more concrete. Because a lot of sports, honestly, is like abstract combat, right? Like you're taking territory or yards or whatever, but it's like that level of abstraction maybe kind of turns some people off at some level, you know, like but once they get to the real stuff, then they're like, oh, this clicks for them. And that's something they want to do.
Yeah, I have no idea. I never really thought about it because I don't really ask too many questions like that. But yeah. But anyway, go ahead, ask him more questions, man. It's interesting.
Do you have a martial arts background?
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. How did that start?
Excuse me. Just like I actually met my instructor at a job that I used to work at, and we were just one day we were talking, and we were talking about martial arts, and he said that he had been in it for a long time, and from that point on, I started. I was about 23 at the time. Stayed with him for at least I got my black belt under him. It took me about 6 years for that, but also the thing about it, when I took my training with him, I didn't go with all those different colored belts. I went with the old style, which was black, brown, or white, brown, and black. So I was a white belt for 3 years, a brown belt for 3 years, and then I put on my black belt.
And tell them what level you are now.
Commercially, it's really weird. Commercially, I'm a 9th then, but in actuality, once you're a black belt, you're a master under the system, because it goes, the white, brown, and black, which equals student, disciple, master.
I got you.
So when you're putting on all the Dan ranks and stuff, it's really more of a commercial aspect of it than actually the reality of it. I mean, once you're a black belt, you're a black belt.
What style was this?
Tang Soo, which is what Chuck Norris started off with.
That's a Korean style, right?
Yes, it's a Korean style that is heavily Japanese. I mean, not Japanese, Chinese. And from there, you get a lot of the circular movements and stuff. Whereas a lot of the Korean styles, and I'm not going to say all for sure because I don't want to step on anybody's toes. A lot of them are very linear. Whereas I have a lot of the Chinese influence, so I get a lot of circular and spinning movements. Not just spinning movements, but angles and stuff.
That's interesting. So, because I've only seen some pictures, a handful of pictures here and there from books and whatnot, and it looks karate-like to me just from the outside. I don't know any of the nuances of the techniques, but it's interesting with Korea because Korea is obviously geographically between Japan and China, and
Right.
that cross-cultural. I wonder if that's part of it. Do you know much of the history of it?
That's exactly what it is because they were Korea was invaded by China or Japan. I mean, they were constantly. It would be foolish if you see a bunch of people that are in your country and you become friends with them on their martial arts and your martial artists. Why would you not exchange techniques? I mean, not everybody was an enemy that occupied their country. So that's really how it happened. And when I say just to give you another idea of the Chinese influence, Tang refers to the Tang dynasty of China. So
Hmm.
it's Tang meaning China, Soo meaning hand, and Do meaning path, method, or way. So it's still basically the way of the China hand.
Huh.
If you were to say that same thing in Japanese, it would be Kenpo. And
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because
law
that's
of the fist,
certainly.
law of the fist, way of the fist. And then if you say Chinese, it's Chunfa, which is the fist art. So they're all intertwined and all have it.
So is Kempo and Tang Soo Do, are they the same art? Are they just related arts, or is it just
They're related. You can never say, oh, a Tang Soo Do stylist is going to do what a Kenpo stylist is. Not necessarily. Their applications may be different, but a lot of the principles are the same.
Yeah,
You
very
don't hit somebody one time. I don't interrupt you. I'm sorry. You don't hit people one time. If you're going to punch somebody, you elbow them. You need to draw back, so you hit them 3 times as opposed to just one time. You don't just block and then hit. You block and counter, or you even hit before they even strike you.
Is there any connection with that in Taekwondo, or are they completely separate lineages?
Well, originally Taekwondo was that was a military art, and it was a combat art. What happened is Korea at one point wanted to have a universal martial art. So this is the art of Korea. So that's when they kind of put the emphasis on Taekwondo, and then it became more sports oriented. So whereas Tang Soo Do nowadays, you can't. There are tournaments, but originally it was meant as a killing art, and that's it was taught to military men and things like that. Of course, it was to the upper class, and it was when they were taught Warengado, which is a completely different story. It's a lot more involved than that.
So is Tang Soo Do still fairly popular, or has it been overshadowed a lot with the kind of the prominence of Taekwondo or the?
I think it's found its own vehicle as of late, and it's funny because when I first started it out, and people will ask me what am I taking, and I said it's a Chinese Korean art, and I remember going to this one martial arts supply store and telling this guy, yeah, it's a Korean, and he goes, I never heard of that. Nowadays it's come to more fruition, so people they see Tang Soo Do, and one of the best ways you can tell if they're Tang Soo Do, if they're wearing uniforms, those are the ones that have the black trim around them, completely black trim. That's Tang Soo Do, or traditional Tang Soo Do. But yeah, and there was like 5 styles of Taekwondo. I don't remember them all. Wodokan, Jungwoo-kwan, Chochi-kwan. I forget the other one. But anyway,
Did
those
you
are
say
5 main
Mudok-kwan?
styles that they blended in.
You said Mudok-kwan?
Mudok-kwan, yeah.
Yeah, because I heard of that. I heard of Farangdo, and I heard of Hapkido, of course.
Well, Hapkido is it's all interwoven together. Because there's Mudok-kwan, Odo-kwan, Chungmu-kwan, and Jida-kwan, and there's one other one I can't remember. Those are like the 5 main ones. Because if you were to look at my original family style that I was taught was called Choche-kwan. So it was Choche-kwan, Tang Soo Do, and then I went to Tang Soo Do, Mudok-kwan, Tang Soo Do. So, anyway.
That's interesting because didn't your other buddy Scott, we had him on the show and he was a Kempo guy, isn't that right, Tony?
Yeah, Scott was a Kempo. He owned a Kempo school out in Laguna Beach, yeah, California. It doesn't. I can't remember. I know it's Huntington Beach. That's what it was. Hi,
Sorry,
James.
my son is photo bombing.
You mean my godson? Hi.
Godfather,
So yes,
you can say hi.
it's a photo
Anyway,
bomb.
sorry.
Boy, he's a good-looking kid. Yeah,
Cool.
I liked Hapkido because, you know, of joint locks naturally, and of course it added the kicks and things like that. And you know, there was that, or probably still is that big Hapkido school on the northwest side of Chicago there off of Diversity, I think it is. Huh?
Han, but I don't think he teaches anymore. But yeah, the school is still there.
Yeah,
Han
I
was
would
the-
have.
yeah.
He'd have to be way old. They brought that hotshot guy in from Korea. That kid, man, he could run on the walls and do backflips off the walls, and I mean, it was very athletic. I don't know how their fighting abilities are, but you know, yeah. But go ahead, Joe. Ask more pro-Egan questions.
Now, yeah, let's talk about, because, so you got into law enforcement. Was that something you did out of high school, or was that something that came later?
Oh, later. I was 30 years old before I got into the county. Then a lot of it, you know, unfortunately, whether people like to say it or not, it was very political in that respect. Is sometimes you gotta talk to this person or talk to that person. It's not always the case, and I don't know now because I've been away from it for so. I mean, I'm talking 30 years ago. But you needed to, you know, talk to somebody. It still took me 16 months to get in, but I didn't start with the county until I was about 30 years old.
This is Cook County,
Yes.
Cook County Sheriff. Yeah, I have
Yes.
a buddy who's, and I don't know as far as who he had to talk to or whatever, but he's a Chicago policeman. And it took him a long while to get in there too. I think he applied and worked as a security guard for a few years at least before he got into the academy, maybe longer, I forget, but yeah, I'm sure that those jobs are hard to come by.
Yeah, they take a while, but you know, once you're in there, you pretty much got it made because it's a union. It was law enforcement. They did a big cut in the county a few years ago, and they weren't going to mess with us because we were law enforcement. They're considered, you know, to keep the community safe.
Can you talk about that? I mean, because a lot of people like, okay, like for example, in Chicago or probably any large city, when you're on the police force of Cleveland or Chicago, you're a Chicago cop, you're a Cleveland cop. But that's not the case with Cook County or probably other counties. Tell us about the different, I don't know what you would even call them, divisions or types of, you know, officers you can be in you know, with that.
Yeah, there's basically three different departments. They're all the same department, but there's divisions, I guess you want to call it that. And within them, there's small ones. I'll give you an example. There's sheriff's police. Excuse me, those are ones who do all the unincorporated areas. They wear the brown uniform. So as far as we always call them the clowns in brown, but anyway. And then the other two was either corrections or court services. And then you would go off into those. And then, you know, I was an offshot of that. They had another department, which was Department of Community Supervision and Intervention. And I was with electronic monitoring. So there's a lot of different ones within, but what the sheriff's department does, other than the sheriff's police, is we deal with everything that has to do with the courts, pretrial detainees and people that are working things off, or, you know. So we don't necessarily, when we go on patrol, we're not on patrol like Chicago where they're watching for people doing stuff. And, you know, we have specific calls that we usually go to. And those are people that I'm talking about myself and what I did.
But in theory, this is, even now, even though I've known you almost 20 years, I still need some clarity because I forget. You have, or the sheriff's department or whatever has broader powers of arrest than, let's say, the city of Chicago cop, correct?
We're pretty well equal. What we have and what they don't have, and I believe me, I have a lot of Chicago police friends, and I'm not slamming or anything, but they always say, you know, they always forget that Cook County is not in Chicago. Chicago is in Cook County.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, yeah, and the way it works is in law enforcement is whatever neighboring towns you kind of have jurisdiction to. So the county is any town, any county that we touch, we have jurisdiction in. So if you say, well, you're in DuPage, you're in jurisdiction. Yes, we do. We have actually statewide jurisdiction. So it's just basically the different kinds of jobs that each one of us do as opposed to us in Chicago, for example.
Were you considering being a Chicago cop, or were you definitely had your eyes on the sheriff department? Like, was there a reason for one over the other, or?
Well, yes, I originally did want to be a Chicago cop, but my first wife was set against it, and I made a mistake of listening to her. So, mistake or not a mistake, I don't know. But at the time, I really wanted to, and she didn't want me to. She was worried it was too dangerous. So she figured, okay, go with the county. It's not as bad, but it can be. I mean, when you're out on the street, I mean, I started in the jail, so, but when you're out on the street and carrying a gun and you're in uniform and you got a squad car, nobody cares who you are, where you're from. You know, if they need they need police, they need police. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was going to kind of ask because I mean, yeah, if something is going down and the Chicago cops aren't there, I'm imagining it's. I mean, is it still considered your duty, or do you have to back off, or like what are the, you know, how does that work?
If we're witnessing a crime, I'll say for example, a guy's beating up his girlfriend or something and knocking around on the street, and we just go by, we can be sued for that because we had with failure to act. So yeah, we would have to do something. We have if something is going on, and if somebody's just, I don't know, vandalizing or something, we can try and get the information. But otherwise, if we see an actual crime in front of us, we have to do something. Like, for example, we don't normally do any kind of traffic stops, but if we're behind somebody and that person's all over the road, we have to stop them and see what's going on with them.
Interesting.
And, let me just add to that. As a matter of fact, there was one time that happened. This guy was all over the road a little bit. And I think it was early in the morning, and we pulled him over and said, "What's going on?" He's like, "I just got off work. I'm extremely tired." And looked at the guy, and he didn't look drunk. He didn't have any alcohol smell. I said, "Okay, you know." He gave him his driver's license, and he wasn't more than maybe a mile away. So, well, take it easy. But we had to do something. We had to see what was going on. So maybe they're just stopping him and waking him up a little bit, saying, "Oh, I got it." You know, maybe that was enough for him to get home safer.
Like in the case where, like, yeah, you intervene on like an assault or something that's going on. Do you then like make the arrest and take them to the Chicago police, or like imagining, like, let's say it's within the city boundaries, things like that, or do they get handed over to the local authorities, or is it just, you know, because yeah, how does that work exactly then once like the process?
We used to do that. We used to like if something happened in Chicago, we had to stop. We'd call Chicago. And then it got to the point where they didn't want, pardon me, I'm sorry. They didn't want to do all of our work. I mean, they didn't want to do all the processing of it. So they basically put it in our hands. And then our supervision, our administration says, "No, you guys are going to do all the booking. You guys are going to do it. You have to stop somebody. Might not be your job, but if you're arresting somebody, you're going to take them down to Maywood and you're going to book them."
So is Maywood like is that like the home base for the Cook County sheriffs?
It was for me. That was probably the closest one we would go to. They also have one in Markham and I forget the other one. So Rolling Meadows. So any of those we could go to. And what we do there, what we used to do, like if somebody, say for example, was on Rolling Meadows in a house arrest and we were going to bring it back to jail, we would bring them all the way back to Cook County, but they changed that and said, "No, you're going to bring somebody back. They got to come back to Cook County. If you're in Rolling Meadows, just bring them over to Rolling Meadows and leave them with them." And then they put them on the bus for all the guys going back to the jail from court. So there's been a lot of changes, a lot more responsibility.
Is it the
I have an
sheriff's?
interesting story about
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so Kevin's stepson was a bailiff, and he was working out of Maywood. So I had something to give him. I don't remember now what it was. It doesn't matter. But you know me, I'm an early bird. So I show up there at like 7 o'clock in the morning. And, you know, I'm waiting in line to get in, get, electronic, cleared and shit. What do you call it? Metal detector and everything. And so one of the guards says, "Okay, wait in the back of this line, man." I'm like, "All right." So I'm waiting. And they start calling like a roll call. Everybody in this line that I'm in. I'm in a line for friggin' slop. Okay. They thought that I was going to do some road crew shit. So I'm like, yo, wait a minute here. Okay. I'm here, I'm here to see Terry O'Donnell, man. I got something for him. They're like, oh, Jesus Christ, well, why didn't you say something? I'm like, it's all right. So one of your guys almost had me on a road crew.
Well, to be fair, I mean, they took a look at you and that's where most people would be putting you, right?
Yeah, well, and yeah, of course. And I was in the back of the line. That's where they put all of us Italians, it looks like. So, but Dan,
Blame 'em?
I've had to go. So I've been there, and I've been to the one in Rolling Meadows with somebody that had a traffic traffic violation or what have you. I've never been to the one in Markham. I've driven past it a lot. It's by that Swaparama over there, the outdoor flea market. But that's getting close to the Indiana border when we're talking Markham.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were no other satellites. Those were the 3 locations. And I've been to your place, 26 and Cal, of course, to see you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that those are the main courthouses. I don't think I'm missing one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Talk a
North-
little bit about Cook County Jail, because as we were saying, that's like one of the largest, if not the largest jail in the country, or county jail.
It is the largest single site jail. I believe LA County is bigger than us, but LA County, they've got their jail spread out. So it's not all in one location. There's like, one over here, one over there, whatever, they're not all in the same area. Whereas ours are all basically clustered in one area. That's the difference.
Well, this is a little pet peeve of mine. I got two pet peeves, but maybe you can answer this one. Maybe you don't know, but people always use the term jail, like he's going to jail, like he killed 3 people, he's going to jail. Well, no, he's going to go to prison if he killed 3 people. Distinguish the difference between, there's like limits to how long you can stay at county jail. So tell us the difference between county and a prison.
Difference between county and a prison is everybody that's in jail are considered pretrial detainees. There might be some there that have been sentenced, but if they're still in Cook County, they have other cases that they have to dispose of before they can go. And then there's also a lot of times where people have been convicted, like say they killed 2 people. So they kill one person, they get convicted, they get sent to prison, but the other case for the other person that they killed comes up. So they're brought back from prison to Cook County Jail. They'll stay in Cook County Jail while they're going through the court process. And then once that's done, then they get shipped back to prison to continue their case or to continue their sentence, or, it could be consecutive and they could just stack it on.
Yeah, I'm glad you cleared that up, because people just use that, jail. And the other thing is, corrections officers are not policemen. They're not cops. And we're not going to drop names, but we've talked about a person or two that were, for a short time COs, and, they told people, yeah, I was a cop. There's a difference, right?
There is. The only thing that's the same is, like I told you, court services, corrections, and sheriff's police. We're all considered deputies. The only difference with that is sheriff's police are police officers. So it says police officers on their badge, but in actuality, they are deputies. So yeah, if you're a correctional officer, you have police powers in the respect that, you can hold somebody, but you're not a police officer. Like even myself, I was an investigator, and I carried my gun for almost 30 years, 24 hours a day if I wanted to. Now that I'm retired, I have to get a concealed carry because I don't have, it's called an IROC or a ROC, which is basically, it's a retired police officer's certification, because I wasn't denoted as a police officer. So I basically fall in the same category as everybody else, which is, it's a dumb law, but it's a law that's been on the books. It hasn't been changed. So.
Is that a national thing, or that's just an Illinois thing?
It's Illinois. It's a county thing.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's interesting, because there are subtleties. There are, there are differences. Like we've had one of my students on here, and good friend, he lives in Indiana, Justin Brown, sensational Japanese martial artist and instructor, and he's in the Tri-C program, so he's coming along very well. And he made sure that when we had him on, that we introduced him, we distinguished he's an EMT and not a paramedic. And that's another one of those terms that gets thrown around. People will call let's say, hey, the medics came, the paramedics came, well, they're really EMTs, no disrespect, but this is like, I'm going to jail. No, you're going to prison, you know? See, yeah, so these are little nomenclature things that kind of, it bugs me, and not just in this stuff, but just in anything. Like, I had a friend of mine who was a mechanic. No, he wasn't a mechanic. You know, he's an auto tech. They call them auto techs now, and there's a difference. And I told you, I said it, I got thrown out of Great Clips because I called her a barber, and she's like, I'm not a barber. Okay, we're a hairstylist, and she got really offended. You got to watch what you say,
Yeah. My nephew, who was he went to school, he became a mechanic. As far as I call him a mechanic. He goes, no, I'm a technician. But he stopped getting upset with me for saying that because he realized that, that's the way I was brought up. Anybody who worked on a car, that was a mechanic. But now it's, it's so technical, I guess they have to be called technicians. But
well, my former tech that passed away, Steve the Great, he was awesome, but he explained it pretty much like a technician is a diagnostician, blah, blah, blah. Whereas in his mind, a mechanic is here. I'll tell him what to do here. Change those spark plugs, use a 7/16 socket or whatever it is. You kind of like explain it. They're not going to figure out major issues. Right. I don't know. I don't want to get into that. That's what he told me. I'm neither one of those two. So, but
medical field is bad like that too.
In what?
LPNs, PAs, doctors, physician's assistant, and you got LPNs, RNs.
Nurse practitioner.
A nurse practitioner, right. That's another.
Which is like a physician's assistant. They're all, yeah. DOs, osteopathic doctors. They're doctors. They can prescribe drugs, but they're not an MD.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a chiropractor, they're not MDs.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
When we were talking about prisons, I'm assuming Illinois has state and federal prisons. Is that right? And is it just depending on which laws you break, which one you go to, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Federal prison, you're going to be at
Marion,
MIC or whatever. It's downtown. If you do something and it's in a federal, you'll be held federal. You'll be held in federal, which is downtown. If it's state, you can be held in the county for a while until you're, whatever happens. And I'm talking about before you're sentenced. But yeah, there's definitely different distinctions, so to speak.
And that federal prison downtown, is that high rise, that triangular high rise that you see?
I'm not sure where it is, but it's MCI or MIC, Municipal Illinois Corrections or something. But it's downtown. I don't know exactly where it is, but I know it's downtown. I haven't been to it. I never had to go to it. But yeah, that's federal.
Did you have to do prisoner transfer type stuff?
All the time.
How was that?
And transfer in the respect, like I dealt with people on house arrest. Go ahead. So yeah, I dealt with people on house arrest. So like if somebody violated, yeah, I'd have to bring it back to jail, something like that. But I didn't do the transporting them from the jail to the prison. That's what transportation does, which is a part of corrections. Their job is taking people to court and taking people to prison. That's all they do for the most part.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now, did you ever have any instances where your martial arts training, helped you with your job on the force?
A little bit. One time I had to knuckle a guy's head because he tried to bust out of the back seat of the car. He started kicking it with his feet. So I had to kind of go in there and knuckle his head a little bit. But other than that, for the most part, it was more psychological and more, using the right words, getting people, you don't always have to hit somebody to get them to comply. And that was really what you have to learn how to do. You really had to learn how to talk to people. And in retrospect, that's one of the things I was glad that I started, and I worked in jail for almost 5.5 years because it really taught me how to deal with, for lack of a better word, these shitheads. So I was able to deal with them and get them to comply with a lot of stuff rather than have to really tussle with them. And there's a couple times here and there, but not very often.
So you started for a few years, like in the prison? Is that how,
In jail,
in the jail?
Cook County Jail. I started in Cook County Jail. I worked almost 5.5 years in the jail, and then went over to electronic monitoring, and then the balance of my career was with electronic monitoring. I was a supervisor for a little while. I was on the street for a little while, so I did all aspects of it pretty much.
That must have been pretty intimidating though. So you started out in the jail. I mean, what was that like? Did you have a partner with you or someone to kind of like show you the ropes?
At first, yeah. The way I did it, they stopped it. But the way I did it, I was hired, and I became a cadet. And I was a cadet for about, I don't remember what I was. I don't know, about 6 months. I was a cadet, and then I went to the academy, and then they teach you all the laws and stuff, and then you become sworn. So when I was a cadet, I wore a blue uniform. I looked like a janitor's uniform. I wore that, and then I went to the academy, and then I did all the training, and then I got sworn, became certified. And but now the way it is, if you get hired with the county, they send you straight to the academy because it's a liability factor. Because they figure, well, we can't be sending you into the jail if you're not experienced and don't know anything. So, but when I went in, that's the way they did it. You know, they basically did more hands-on.
Wow. Just how big is that prison? I mean, that seems massive.
It's a jail, Joe.
Yeah, I'm sorry, jail. I'm already messing up.
Well,
You know,
the original jail that I worked in, I think they finally just leveled it, which was just a shame because it was a lot of history there. But that was Division 1. So now they have Division 11. So they're all the way up to, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A couple of them are combined, like 3 and 4 were combined. Those are the women's dorms. But I think there's like 10,000 total they could hold. But with electronic monitoring and stuff, they were way under capacity. But when I was in there, when electronic monitoring was there, but it wasn't as big, we had people sleeping on the floors. It was just real bad overcrowding, which what's one thing that the sheriff did is he got rid of the overcrowding. But in that respect, also a lot of people that should have been in jail are getting let out, at least in my opinion.
Wow. So even with like, they could hold 10,000, but even that wasn't enough.
Yeah. At that one time, yes.
Man, we could get your whole family, Joe. They'll all have a place to stay.
3 meals? Yeah, sign me up.
One kind of neat thing that I was actually able to experience was I did when I worked in a jail, I worked in only one division, and that was Division 1. That was the original division. That was the division that had the bars on it. You walked on the catwalks and walked around. So you didn't have any physical contact with the inmates on their tiers, but in the basement they had all the movement. And that was the first structure. That was the first jail. That was originally called the House of Corrections. Now the reason why I say this is because they have the basement, which is a boulevard. When you walk back and forth, that's where all the movement is. And then if you keep walking to one end, it goes right into the criminal courts building. But just before you go in there, if you turn left and open a door, it takes you down a few steps, and now you're below the main boulevard, and that's where they had solitary confinement cells. And when you walk there, each block, there was 4 blocks, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Each block had its own little door, which is about 3 foot high. It was a dirt path that went in, and then he had all these cells where they were just nothing but holes in the wall. And when they were doing some construction. That's why I walked down there, and they asked the guy, "Can I look at it?" He goes, "You don't want to go there. It's all nasty and everything, and it's filled with rats." I'm like, okay. But they stopped doing that in, I don't know, the early 60s because it was considered cruel and unusual punishment. I still think they should have it for some people.
Wow. So this was like isolation in the basement, just some like hole in the ground where people would be put.
Yep, they'd go up this path, and there was a few cells, and there was this main corridor where an officer would just sit out in the corridor. He wasn't even anywhere in the cells, and he would just sit there. And once they put him in there, just leave him in there. I think they just give him a bucket, and that's about it. And they'd feed him, but that was it. Wow. That was considered cruel and unusual punishment. But anyway, I believe that building is now leveled, which was a shame because it was one of the best ones built. And and it had a lot of history. Capone was in there for a while, and I'm sure a lot of others of notoriety. But I know him for sure, and I'm sure some of his his guys were in there.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the history, and it's a shame that they're tearing stuff down. I was kind of on a rant a little bit online about this is not related to anything we're talking about, but it's about the city of Chicago that you know, the Belmont L stop, the red line and the brown line,
Yeah.
where they're completely redoing that. So if you've been in Wrigleyville now, so you know, you have the classic Chicago L train where it's like steel girders. It has this kind of vintage look to it, but now they're building these cement paths, like they're getting rid of that and they're replacing it with cement structures.
Okay, I lost you for a minute, Joe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I see you're back. No, it's all right. But I'm just saying that, you know, they're replacing it with more efficient, like organized these, it almost looks like monorail kind of lines for
The whole
trains.
length of the, or just that area?
I think it's just that area, from what I can tell from some discussions online I've had with it. But I've also seen that, like, some of the like vintage train stations, L stations, have been completely modernized, which I don't like. I like this, like you said, there's a lot of history there in the city, and that's kind of what gives it its character. And granted, maybe there's some, you know, there's efficiencies there, but yeah, it's a shame that we're losing that history, and hopefully, like, they're not going further with it. But that'd be a real shame.
Look what happened when you and I went back to my hometown in Cleveland. Damn near everything is gone of my house. Everything is gone. Where I boxed, all my high schools except for one. Yeah, and I went to 3 high schools. My grade schools are all gone. I mean, what, you know? Yeah, I'm like you, Joe. I have a sense of the past, and I've been told I live in the past. And you know what? Yeah, I do, and I'm happy to do that. Dan's an old spirit. I mean, he's modern, but probably more than I am. But you know, shit, you know, he's. So Dan, let me ask you this. I mean, without giving names or, you know, anything like that, what were some of the most like incredible things? Like, all right, electronic monitoring. Did somebody escape? Did they like pry it off their ankle and stories like that? I mean, what was like the most outlandish arrest or whatever you want to call it that you had to go on?
Say so many outlandish arrests. I do know one guy. We went to change the guy's equipment, and he thought we were there to bring him back, so he takes off and he leaves. So we get, you know, a couple of our units come over there. We're looking around for him, and we end up going back around. And we see him go back into the house. So we get him outside, and we go to take him in. And we have the other units there, and this guy starts to fight. So we pushed him down, you know, bent him over on the hood of the car and started cuffing him. He's like, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. You know, my one partner said, as he leaned in and says, you can talk, you're breathing. He stopped. He didn't stop breathing. He just stopped complaining. And he was fine. But, you know, there was other times like people would take the bands off and they figure, well, they'll keep it on something warm so they won't know it. So we had one was duct taped to a little dog's neck. Every time they tried taking off the tape, the dog was biting them. But
is there any time that you can take off that monitor or no? Like, I mean, no, right?
What do you mean, while you're on house arrest?
Yeah. Yes.
No. Once it's on your leg, you can't take it off. But you know, they went through several different types of them. You used to have a phone in the house. Now it's all cell wise, but they changed the bands on them now. Now the bands have this steel band in them. It's about an inch and a quarter wide, and I don't know how thick it is, but it's not something you can easily cut. And if you went with one of those like angle cutters or something, you have to be very careful because you'd end up cutting your leg off with those. But that's the only way. You can't get them off with tin snips. And the old bands you could cut off with scissors because their attitude, well, we're going to know you're going to cut it off, so it doesn't matter whether it's on really hard. But now, the reason why they did those metal ones is because they have GPS trackers in them, so we can follow it. We can find the guy. We just got to type it in there. We can find out where exactly he's at, or at least where that band is at. So it's improved a lot.
And they can shower with those on, or there's no limitations?
Totally. Yeah, there's been a couple of times we've gone to people's houses. Can I take a shower? Then I'm like, yeah, please do. Take a bath. I mean, these people have been, you know, dropped off for 2 weeks, and then we come and check on them 2 weeks later, and they're like, "Can I take a bath?" I'm like, yeah. But yeah, you can take a bath, but you're really not supposed to keep it submerged for too long, but they are watertight for the most part. I mean, anything you submerge for too long, it's gonna not be good, but
Well, let me see what else. Have you, well, let's this way, were there any, I've known a lot of Chicago cops. And I've known some, I guess they were partners with some celebrity police officers. We talked about Serge Oliva, you know, I knew one of his old partners. Were there any celebrity Cook County sheriffs?
celebrities.
Well, you know,
Um,
like famous guys that became Cook County sheriffs, deputy sheriffs.
Well, the other way around, or they become deputy sheriffs and then became famous, more so, right?
Well, either way, I mean, well,
Well, the only
okay,
one
like
I
Dennis
didn't know
Farina
him.
was a cop. Okay,
Yeah, I didn't know him, but I did hear of him. The guy that what the heck is his name? Dennis Franz, you know who that is?
yeah, the actor.
Yeah, this stocky guy. He was on
Yeah.
Was it St. Elsewhere or anyway, not St. Elsewhere.
Those
He
three
was
blue.
he was a correction officer at first, and there's a record of him that he did that. And I think there's a couple others. I mean, we know that what's his name? I can't think of it. He was a Chicago cop. The guy
Dennis Farina.
Dennis Farina. Yes, but there's been a couple, but the only one that really sticks out in my head is that Dennis Franz.
Huh.
But I never met him because, like I said, when he was a correctional officer, I don't think I was even working for the county at the time. Because
I never met him, but Dennis Farina, he was cool. He got laid. He was laid out at Montclair Lucania on Belmont. That's the funeral parlor that he was at. And there was a few other actors. I don't like Ron Casala, I think his name was. He was on some Van Damme movies or not Van Damme, Seagal. You know, when he retired from the police department, you know, he got into the movies, but he stayed local. He's dead now, but he stayed local Chicago. I don't think he ever left Chicago unless it was for a movie role, but
yeah,
at the height, I mean, give us a rough idea how many Cook County sheriff deputies are there at one time, like right now, roughly.
I think there's like 3,500, something like that. I don't know the exact amount, but there's quite a few because if you take them all as a whole, they're all over the county. Like I said, they're not. You got people in the jail, you got people working the courts, you got people doing evictions and all kinds of other things. So I'd say overall, I think it's got to be at least 35. Pardon?
There's more Chicago cops than there are sheriffs, right? Deputy sheriffs.
I don't think so.
Okay, how many cops are there, Joe? I thought there was like 9,000 or something.
Oh, I have no idea what the numbers are. That's a good
Maybe
question.
you're right. Maybe I really don't know.
I don't know, Dan. I don't know, but but see, here's another thing that people may not know. If you're a city of Chicago employee, you have to live in the city. Dan, you didn't have to live in Chicago or even Cook County, did you?
No, I when I had started with the county, I had been working for about maybe 2 or 3 years, and then the sheriff wanted to say, well, everybody that works for the county's got to work within Cook County. Well, that just went by the wayside. I know the reason why it went by the wayside because there was a lot of people that were high up in administration. Some of them were living in Indiana, and you're like, you're going to expect me? I just bought a $1 million home or $500,000 home in Indiana, and I'm going to move back to Cook County. So they just kind of said, well, let's forget about that. So now with the Cook County, you can live anywhere. You can even live out of state. Not really supposed to, but you're not going to fire you because of it. Put it that way. Especially if you're making it to work on time.
And you may have said this earlier, but don't the Cook County sheriffs have jurisdiction on the highways that go through the city?
Well, like anywhere within the city or the surrounding, yeah, we do. But like I said, we don't. Unless you're sheriff's police, we really don't do that. Like I said, if I'm on the expressway and somebody's acting like an idiot, yeah, I might be forced to do something. But for the most part, that's not in the scope of our job.
That would be state police, Joe.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's Illinois State Police.
But there are sheriffs that are not necessarily on the interstates, but like, if you're like Arlington Heights or something, you're on Route 53 or something like that. Certain areas there that would be Cook County that would patrol it because it's not.
I live in, technically where I live is unincorporated. So if there's any police, anything like that, it's the county, it's McHenry County Sheriff's.
Right.
It's not the town police for me. Now you go down a few streets and it'll be the town police, or I think maybe even a street over, but my street or the neighbor's next street or something, no. Which is interesting phenomenon, because me growing up in Cleveland, I don't, yeah, it was always Cleveland police, no matter where I went. The only time I saw state police, Ohio State Troopers, was if I was on the turnpike. And I don't know that I ever saw a Cuyahoga County Sheriff. I really honestly don't know that I ever did. But ironically, when I went to that police school, one of my instructors was the former Cuyahoga County Sheriff, Ralph Krieger, and he was also an FBI agent before that. And Elliot Ness was the sheriff as well. The famous Elliot Ness, I think, ended his career in Cleveland. Kind of little.
Hey, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a little. Well, he kind of ended up an alcoholic, and his career didn't go the way he I guess he wanted it to. Things just went wrong. But yeah, it's interesting. Cleveland back then had what's called the torso murders, and it's never been solved. And this is probably 100 years, okay, 1920s, and so on. And the area where there was like a tenement, like a camp for like homeless hobos. That's where a lot of it happened. That's all gone, of course. But Elliot Ness could not crack that case. Things went south. I don't remember all the details now, but yeah. But getting to Dan, my little personal anecdotes. So yeah, we had a little incident together when Dan was at work. And I had actually talked about, I talked about this on a podcast several years ago, or on some video several years ago. And this is the man that it happened to, and I'll refresh people's memories. And Dan, we used to talk every day on the phone when he was at work, even though he was my actual next door neighbor, we were tight. And blah, blah, blah. And I see all these squad cars in the back, Chicago and Elmwood Park police. I'm like, what the hell? So I'm on my back deck, my back porch. I mean, I lived in a 3-flat, and I see the one cop, the big shot. I don't remember now if he was a sergeant or lieutenant, but I'm like, what's up? We're looking for, this, are these homeless? Well, I'm on the phone with the guy right now. What do you want? We need to talk to him. So I told Dan, I said, Dan, the police want to talk to you. Now, Dan knows that I'm a ball buster, so he really right away thought I was putting him on. And I wasn't putting him on. And I the only thing I put him on the phone with the cop. Tell him what happened, Dan.
Yeah, we need you to come here. We need to talk to you. I'm like, is there a problem? No, there's no problem. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I get there, and I guess what had happened was there was a low jack, and they had hit on a low jack. Well, where Tony lived, right next to me, there was no garage. And then the garage to the other side of me, they weren't picking up on that. It's like, they're asking me, who uses your garage? It's just me and my wife, no one else. No one else, no. So they're like, can you come? So I come there, and they see the guy, and there's two of them. There's a Chicago cop and an Elmwood Park cop. He's like, can you open this garage? I'm like, sure. So I open it up, they look in there, and it was completely empty. And the look on their face of shock was hilarious. I had to keep from laughing because it was the shock. So the bottom line was, evidently low jacks don't work as well as people think they do, because there was nowhere in sight. I mean, even across the alley, there was nowhere in sight.
And they were chomping at the bit to nail your ass before you got there, because I stayed out there, and yeah, they were like, we got his ass, this and that. I mean, they were just, all they knew was that you were a deputy sheriff. They didn't know you personally, and I remember you telling me you're not turning your gun in, you're not giving up your pistol unless it's to somebody who's a supervisor, like Fagiano or somebody was there.
Right.
Which you didn't have to, but yeah, but yeah, the moral of that story is low jacks are not, I mean, they weren't even close. I mean, there was nothing around.
Oh.
So, but yeah, that was a very odd, it just really was. And to see the police, how they were like hoping to nail you, it just got me. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I thought there was some loyalty here. I mean, I know Chicago don't like county sheriffs, that I know, but you think the Elmwood Park, and what is it with that county sheriff police thing? What's the rivalry there?
Well, it's changed over the years, but yeah, it
Okay.
gets back to, like I said, Chicago always looks at Cook County like you're in our city. They don't look at it, no, your city is in our county.
Yeah.
So they didn't like us for that. But over the years, it's improved quite a bit. A lot of it was because of, all the outside units, the electronic monitoring and swapping everybody who's worked with Chicago a lot. And so the animosity is not like it was before, or the rivalry, I should say. So because I had a lot of dealings with Chicago from I'd probably say the last 10 years of my career, and they were all very helpful, all very nice, all glad to see us, and vice versa. So it did get better, but it unfortunately got down to an us and them thing. You got the police and you got everybody else. So it was a divided front, is what it was.
Yeah, you see, most of my Chicago police friends were old, like
Right.
long retired, and they're like, yeah, yeah, I'm thinking about moving. I should probably call county sheriffs. They're good at getting furniture out of a house and shit. That's the kind of they would talk shit all the time.
Yeah.
They're mailmen. All they do is serve papers and shit.
Right.
They don't. I mean, I knew better because I had known, not as close as you, but I knew other county sheriffs before I knew you. And even like DuPage County sheriffs and and I knew that there were some hard asses. They got themselves into shit sometimes, and they earned their money, but yeah, it's just kind of like, I know with Chicago, the police and firemen, they always have or at least they used to have the yearly boxing matches. Remember, firemen against the police?
Yeah.
The firefighters have a huge advantage, because they can work out while they're on the ships, or coppers got to do it on free time. But yeah, I kind of miss all that. I really do. That kind of stuff, that because I had cop friends and fireman friends and county sheriff. Yeah, I miss all of that. I miss a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it shifted from boxing to MMA, so they're running some MMA things for
Oh, they should have stayed with the boxing. That was bad enough. I don't even want to think of them doing MMA. Yeah, there was what was his name? Like Andre Orlovsky was either Cleveland, Chicago cop, or the sheriff or something. But I don't know all about all that. But somebody told me that. I don't know. I don't want to get into that because I can't remember now too much of that. But yeah, Chicago through the years had, I've heard so many stories, about police officers that were coppers in the 70s. And I don't know if I knew anybody who was a police officer in the 60s. I may have, but I don't remember. I remember my friend but he was like a cadet. He never made it onto the force. He was just a cadet. He trained with Ronnie Hoffman, who was a pretty big name in martial arts in Chicago back in the day before I moved here, like internal martial arts and all of that, like Count Dante stuff. And what was the other one? Paul Ventacinque. He's a Chicago cop, big time martial art guy. Yeah. What about martial arts in the sheriff's department outside of yourself? Not speaking about yourself, but were there any other notable martial artists that you knew of that were on the sheriff's department?
I knew a lot of different guys that were good, but I wouldn't necessarily say they were famous kind of guys. They were just very, very good martial artists. Because one thing that you find out, and especially if you worked in the jail, you learn how to get rid of the fluff and you use meat and potato stuff, which is what it's all about anyway. So I didn't know any personal like stars, but I did know some very good martial artists. which was nice. So I trained with a few of them here and there, but I can't remember a lot of their names. Some of them have passed.
Yeah, getting rid of the fluff. That's so important. And unfortunately, a lot of guys go to their graves never getting rid of the fluff. They don't know because they never really had to use it, or they use it in situations where they were going to win no matter what because of outside circumstances. Yeah, you and I have had lots of talks about that and lots of workouts at the gym, my old gym in Bensonville, and not just, I mean, weights, but fighting,
Yeah.
And of course your boy Steve. Matter of fact, everybody, for those of you who've watched my Foundations of Footwork video with Steve Nadolski, that's Dan's son, Steve. Of course, that was filmed a long time ago. Steve's 30 now. I can't believe this.
Yeah, he's good. He's much more well-rounded than I am in a lot of respects because he's got a really good ground game as well as a stand-up. I'm more of a stand-up guy. If I have to go to the ground, I mean, you've taught me fundamentals. Could I say that I'm a wrestler? And by no means, no. But I do know a couple of fundamentals that you've always instilled.
You got really good on the ground, and your not your fundamentals, but your striking was really good. I've seen you do it. I've seen you go at it. So I have firsthand. This is not, I've seen it, so I know where you're at. And you got to meet Bill Wallace, remember?
Yeah, on
Of
my
course,
birthday.
Terry Dow.
Yep.
Terry Dow did a little thing at your school when you were teaching. He's been on the podcast. Great guy. Yeah, he had mentioned me doing something out for him this year. Every year I used to go, but I haven't heard from Terry. And of course, with me having my surgery, he normally holds it in March, or maybe it's even in April, but yeah, I'm not going to be able to now because I haven't heard from him. But yeah, we've had some interesting times, you and I, good and bad. We've had a lot of stories that aren't, we can't talk about, but we also had some good ones. We were there for each other through breakups and through blossoming romances. You name it, we were there.
Seeing you brought that up. I have to share one time, and that was a time you and I went to a bar, and I forget what the bar was, but the way the bar was set up, it was pretty much an oval bar, and the barmaid was in the middle, and she work around it, and you started shooting pool with this guy, but before you did, I'm sitting at the bar and this woman across from me was drinking, and she was, I don't want to be mean, but she was pretty troll-like. And you walked over to her and you told her, yeah, my buddy likes you. So she comes over to me and starts talking to me. I'm like, and you're just smiling away, shooting pool. I'm like, you asshole.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man.
Like, where's your, I'm married. She said, I'm married to a fireman. I said, where is he? He's at another bar. I said, well, why don't you go there?
Yeah, but see, she's married, but she's still coming over to you.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying? Because you're irresistible. Oh no, I'm good for that kind of stuff. Yeah, especially if there's a pool table around. But in a woman, I'm gonna get into some sort of trouble. But no, we normally kept clean, man.
Fun.
You and I, we'd hang out, see each other in the front of the. Well, I lived in a 3-flat, but Dan lived in a house. But I could pretty much open my bedroom window, and if he was, we could almost touch each other. The houses were so close together over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had some good times, man. Really, your yearly parties, and yeah, it was just, it was pretty good, man. Pretty good times. I missed that.
Like you said, there's a lot of things we really can't talk about.
No, we can't. But I was glad that when Steve was so little, he was getting on the wrestling program, and I could show him things and help him out with his standard wrestling, just his amateur stuff. He ended up doing good. He was 6th in the state. And for a kid who never wrestled until high school, he didn't grow up wrestling. He was a great martial artist through you, but that's different than wrestling. You know that. So And then, of course, I'm just happy that you got to spend time with Kevin. And
Yeah.
well, you can
What a
never
man.
put one past him. Anytime you started to feel bad about yourself or feel down, Kevin would step on you. All right. He wouldn't
You're
give you
not
the hand to
kidding.
help you up. What the hell, Duber? You know,
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ.
He's gotten on my case a few times too. He had,
Oh,
and I needed it. I
yeah.
absolutely needed it.
And he never meant anything by it because, you know, he really, off the side, man, really respected you and admired your physique, you know, because you were like the bodybuilder of all of us. I mean, you know, you had that body when you, especially when you cut weight and shit, you look like, I honestly think you could have entered a bodybuilding contests, local ones for sure.
I don't know about that, but
Yeah, no, you did. You know, you had that going for you. And you know something, everybody, I'll tell you what Dan's forte was with lifting was hammer curls. Okay. Dumbbell
Seated.
hammer curls. While I was the straight curl guy, doing the strict shit, Dan would do reps with 90-pound dumbbell hammer curls, and you didn't even sweat that.
seated too. I wasn't standing.
Seated, yes. They were not like momentum and shit. No, seated alternate dumbbell curls. He'd pound out 10 reps like nothing. I've seen and sets. That's impressive. That
When did
really
you start lifting?
Pardon?
When did you start lifting?
I lifted on and off for a long time when I was young, like, you know, in early 20s, and I went away from it. And then when I got into the jail, I started working out for a little bit, and I tore my shoulder because I was pushing it too fast. And then I got away with just doing light lifting, and I met Tony, and then I started back up again. And that's when I really hit it well when I was, you know, and I had the advantage because when I was at work, the basement from where I worked, that was where the gym was. So I would go down, have maybe a sandwich, and I'd work out half of my lunchtime. So I was constantly keeping myself toned, and then I would go with Tony and Kevin, and then we would hit the weights heavy because I needed a spotter, and I didn't trust the spotters at work.
No, and everything was climbing, man. Dan was there when I blew out this arm, filming, getting ready for the snap no tap. When I blew out everything, the labrum and the bicep and, you know, the rotator and all that shit. As a matter of fact, Dan, you were the one that took me to the hospital ultimately for my surgery. You drove me there. And then the girl that I was seeing, you had a split and she came to get me. And then Joe was there when I blew out my right arm. Those are my, knock wood, my two major injuries. And you know, both of you guys were there for it. Like literally like life-changing. Especially Joe's, because I never got it repaired. But no, we've had overall, I look at things like the totality of it. Okay. Like, all right, everybody has bad things, but you have good. What outweighs what? And our good times are really, really good. We had a lot of them, and we just had like, but you know, near the end, you know, when you're divorced, when your marriage was breaking up, I had broken up. We had some rough patches, you know, I broke my hip, you know, all that shit. It was just getting pretty bad there for a while.
Yeah, that's when I met you, is when you broke your hip. You're nursing it back when I met you.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. And I actually ended up breaking it again, but that was afterwards. But yeah, and then so I had my hip and then the arm thing, which laid me up for quite a while. But yeah, you know, and then you went through your surgeries and shit. I mean, it's just like, man, never ending. Never ending. But we took care of each other, man. We were there for each other. And, you know, that was so much different than where I live here. Where I'm now, you can't count on anybody. Okay. And it's not exclusive to me. I mean, you know, people just they don't have that out here, that sense of community. Whereas in a neighborhood like where we lived, it's tight knit. You know, there's always somebody there to help. It's just the way the city work, you know, and people tend to get that backwards. They think the rural areas where everybody chips in. It's not the case. I've not seen it. And it's not even for me, it's for other people. And I'm always the guy that ends up helping other people. And my roommate Eddie is like that. He helps people because nobody else will give a damn out here. No, it's not for me. But you know, I enjoy the tranquility, and especially now that the weather should hopefully be changing. there's something to that. But so another thing with Dan and I, it wasn't a rivalry, but we used to like to challenge each other with pizzas or Chinese, Italian beef sandwiches. And, we both had our, Joe, why don't you step in on this because you know a lot about that shit. Get your input on your favorite beefs, and we know your favorite pizza.
Yeah, and I recently just had a friend go there and say it was mediocre. I was kind of upset. I still have to have words with him. But so it's Pequod's Pizza up in Morton Grove. That's my place. Tony and I will hit that sometimes after a workshop.
Let me interrupt. I stopped and got my hair cut this weekend after the seminar, and the girl that cut my hair, this is in Lake Zurich. I never was there before. She brought up Pequod's. She goes,
really? Huh.
Yeah.
I've never eaten there.
You got to, Dan.
Yeah, we got to remedy that.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. There's supposed to be another couple that are way south that are really good, but I can't remember what the names are. People that are on the south side, they just rave. Oh no, that's the best. But never had it.
Yeah, Southsiders.
Yeah, I was telling Tony a few days ago when I used to go on patrol, I used to hate the south side, and I'm not necessarily biased, but the reason why I hated it because most of the time they would put me in the worst area, because the worst area of Chicago is in what is it? Inglewood. The next worst area of Chicago is the west side, which is like 400 or 500 north, and then like Kedzie around that area. That area is probably the second worst. So I hated going to the south side because it was just a crappy area. There was nowhere you could go and eat or sit down and just relax. I just hated it. But I talked to anybody when I worked with it was on the south side. He said, "Oh, you're north sider. Oh, you must be gay."
Well, he's so right. Now, here's the thing. When Paul Dodds was in for training, it was Paul Dodds, Uncle Vinny, and I wanted Dan to go. I wanted to take Paul. He had been here before, but he had never seen the south side. So Dan's like, "No, I'm not going on the south side." Okay, so we go to the south side. Now, this is how it works down there. So we go to this bar I've never been to before. They had this immaculately perfect, beautiful, absolute, startling bartender. She was actually won lookalike contests for Christy Brinkley. She was that beautiful. So Paul's like, oh my God, look at that. I says, well, I'm going to look at that. All right. I want to talk to her too. I says, but I got to figure this out. Because if I would have told her where I was from, I would have no chance.
Mm-hmm.
So when she came over, I said, excuse me. I says, my name's Tony. What's yours? She says, Chris. I said, Chris, can you do me a favor? She says, well, that depends. I'm like, do you have like those local, like neighborhood, like little newspaper things, like where they sell stuff or they have rentals? I says, because I live up on that, friggin' north side. I can't stand it. I want to move out here. I need a place. I need one of these newspapers. Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, you don't want to be up there with all those gays, and that's exactly what she said. All the gays on the north side. So that for people who don't know Chicago, they think all north siders are gay, and all the north siders think the south siders are inbred. Okay, that's just how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So with that come online, with that thing, we ended up dating. We went out for a while. I don't know if you ever met her. I had her over at the house, but yeah, that's how you have to play that, because there is a huge disconnect between the south side and the north side in Chicago, man. It's like territorial. You don't cross over that much.
Yeah. The biggest thing is the baseball rivalry, and it's weird because Cubs and Sox, they like each other, but it's weird. The south side absolutely does not like the Cubs by any means, ever. Whereas you get Cubs fans and they're like, they'll root for the Sox. Like if the Sox are in the World Series, they'll root for them. Sox fans, if the Cubs are in it, they'll root against them. They'll root for the other team. They're just that adamant about it. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is.
They're jealous.
Right. Exactly. Are you in this city, Joe?
No, not anymore. I'm in the burbs.
Okay.
But I grew up, like I said, not too far from where you were originally, right by the Gordon Tech area. That was mine. So not too far from Wrigley. It was like, 3 miles west of Wrigley or so. So,
I grew up in Argyle and Lincoln, right by Lincoln, Lawrence and Western.
yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, well, is it Wells Park kind of over there?
Yeah, Wells, and then there's River Park.
Yeah, River Park.
Yeah, you weren't far from Lincoln Square,
No,
you
no,
know?
not at all.
Was Degerberg Academy there back then or no?
Yep, and then they were still there by the time I moved out of the city, and then they moved over to by Schurz High School.
Yeah, well, that didn't last.
Yeah.
He's still down there. I mean, last I heard he was still in Lincoln Park or Lincoln Square as well. But yeah, no, the one by Shores, which used to be Choi's. That was Choi's Taekwondo over there.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
and he moved in. That didn't make it there. Which I didn't think it would. Milwaukee, that's all changed. Yeah, I haven't seen Fred Degerberg since Johnny Liver's funeral, and that was 2012. So it's been 10 years since I've seen Fred.
I met a guy long before he opened up in Lincoln Square, and he used to teach out of a park district in Lincoln Park. That's originally where Degerberg started teaching at, and then he moved to Lincoln Square.
Bob Beal, is that you're referring to? And his boxing coach, Bob Beal, taught out of River Park in the basement.
No, this wasn't River Park. This was Lincoln Park.
Oh, Lincoln. Okay.
Yeah. That's where his first, if you want to call it a school, that was the first place he had an organized school at. It was Lincoln
Okay.
Park.
Yeah, I got confused because I know Fred's original boxing coach was Bob Beal, and Bob was still teaching boxing just out of a little room in the basement of River Park, probably up into the 80s, because I worked out there a couple times in the basement. But that was kind of one of those things when the longer you were at Degerberg, there'd be these rumors of this guy. So this is the guy who, taught Fred how to box, and this is where it was. And so people would always go check it out. But yeah, and he was like deaf in one ear, and you'd have to shout into his ear, but he had one of those stories where I think because of the damage he received boxing or whatever, he'd retired, but he wanted to keep fighting, and so he took up karate, and that was kind of like one of the proto hybrid fighters, when that's kind of what influenced, I think, Fred, because Fred always had that, well, he called it like I don't call it hybrid or mixed, whatever they call it, blend, I think was a term.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like the karate and the boxing and things like that. So, but
He
I
was
think,
a weightlifter,
yeah, there was pictures of him
Degerberg.
in the gym of like clean and jerking like big amount of weights. So, yeah, he wanted to be a strong man too. I think a lot of that's another thing that was he probably had a lot of the influences on TV that you did, Tony, wanted to be a strong man and a fighter too. That makes a lot of sense. I guess he's a little older than you, or I don't know.
Oh
exactly.
shit, he's a lot older than me. I probably think he's my mom's age, I would think.
Oh yeah, you're probably right. He's probably like 70 plus. But
Yeah, he's way up there. I mean, I don't mean it as an insult. I mean, he's just been around forever. Yeah. I remember he was on that. I had just moved here pretty much. I wasn't here that long, and he was on one of those. They made the news, like they got all these martial arts schools together to try to stop this Chung Mu Kwan, that cult school that was, screwing people over, and they had like him and the heads of these. It was like a mafia thing, the Koreans and all of them trying to band together to figure out a way to shut down this Chung Mu Kwan.
Mhm.
Remember that, Dan?
I think so. Yeah.
Because they were a cult and they were like harassing people, students and everything. And they eventually went out of business. And I guess they were out on the East Coast too, but they were called something else. I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't like Chung Mu Kwan. It might have been like Chung Mu Do or something like that, right? I don't know, but I met a woman who was a black belt in Chung Mu Kwan at a private party at somebody's house. And yeah, she just was a little off, wasn't with it.
And
you never know.
It's funny you say that cultish. I don't know whether it was cultish, but I remember my instructor used to tell me about in the 60s, they used to have the dojo wars, but it was the Chinese arts, and it was the green dragons against the
Black dragons.
black dragons. Yeah. And I remember that was with Count Dante. And one guy,
Well,
Konsevic, I think he was killed for the spear.
Jim Konsevic, and yes, now I had mentioned earlier today that Eddie Blackberg was my friend that was a police cadet and studied with Ronnie Hoffman. Well, he knew Jim Konsevic, and they worked out together with Ronnie Hoffman and Kenny Knudsen. And I knew a guy, well, we call him Orlando or Fluffy. Dennis was his real name, little guy, he passed away. He was an active student at the Green Dragon when those Dragon Wars were, when those Dojo Wars were going down. And interesting, yeah, that was long before my time. I was just I was born, but I was in Cleveland because Dante died in what, 75? I was not, I was a kid. But yeah, that shit happened either in the late 60s or early 70s, something like that.
I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the guys that actually was there at that fight, he signed my first brown belt certificate.
No kidding.
Yeah, I can't think of what his name is. He's not. He's passed away now. But yeah,
Dave
he was
Dwyer,
one of the guys.
or Doug Dwyer, perhaps.
No, I can't think of the things.
Lawrence Day.
Nope. He used to operate a school actually on the south side on 35th and Halstead, Mass Martial Arts. That's where Maka used to originally be at. Frank Novak.
Oh no, I don't know him. No,
Yeah,
I don't know him.
he was one of the guys that was
Dante's
there.
place was on the south side.
Yeah.
Dante was a South Sider. John Keane, he was an Irishman, but before he went nuts, he used to work out at Johnny Coolin's gym. Johnny was a boxer, and he learned the trick about not getting lifted off the ground and all of that. Dante had some tie-ins with, I don't know, man, with the organized crime and things like that, because he was not legitimate. I mean, he was. I shouldn't say. I don't mean his martial arts even. I'm just saying he was into things.
Yeah.
Okay. Extracurricular activities, I guess. And,
Yeah, I believe he was into porn movies or something. Not that he necessarily acted, but I think he produced and stuff like that.
yeah,
I'm
he
sure
was
it probably
into
wasn't.
some dark stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had some. He was from what I was told. Well, I got some interesting stories, but I don't know. Did you ever meet Bobby Pearl? Bobby Pernitsky, the copper from Chicago, through me.
I
Maybe
didn't.
okay.
I've heard the name. I don't think I ever met him. Maybe one
Yeah,
time at Eva's, maybe.
Yeah, at Eva's, that's it. Because
Yeah.
he was a legend. But he knew Dante, and he was telling me once, and I forgot the country. It doesn't matter, but like Bobby's sitting there drinking, and Dante, he's over there doing something. And he's like, "Hey, Bobby," and he's like, "What, John?" He's like, "What's the capital of Colombia?" And he said, "I don't know, Bogota." He's like, "All right, let me write that down, Bogota." He was just making up a fake resume about all the places he fought in. Right? He was just making his shit up, and he's asking Bobby Pearl, what's the capital of this or that country? But yeah, I heard from what I would consider a reliable source that he ended up. They said he died of a bleeding ulcer, which I'm not here to dispute it, but he was pretty much living in fear near the end of his life. Look, and that just because I think he had the wrong people after him. And I like I said, that I'm hearing everything secondhand, but from reliable sources.
Yeah, he's in an unmarked grave too.
Yeah, right, in River Grove.
Yep.
Yeah, I used to live across the street from there with Eddie Blackberg for a while. We were roommates years ago. But yeah, that was the next town over from where you and I live. Yeah, interesting fellow. From what I heard, they said he was good at what he did. I mean, not deadliest man alive shit, but that what he knew, he was Robert Trias, basically Kempo.
Right.
And then did some other stuff, I gather. I know he boxed a little. This I know because he hung out at Johnny Coolin's gym. Of course, he's going to know how to box some.
Mhm.
But I've seen just a couple of video clips of him. He did not know how to wrestle. I mean, it was embarrassing to see it. But all of his crazy, I remember talking to Degerberg about it. I talked to Tom Sav about him, and because Sav was into Kempo, and he's the one who really thought he was good. He said, "Oh yeah, he was good at his Kempo." Who am I to say? I mean, like I said, he was dead before I was even, training, I think. But
Yeah.
you never met him, did you?
No. I think he was dead long before I even started. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure.
75, he died. When did you
Yeah,
start?
yeah. I didn't start. Oh wow. Probably early 80s is when I
Oh,
started.
okay.
I was 23. So
All
yeah.
right. 1980s or 1880s?
Yeah.
Well, no, I just don't know. I mean, I don't want to forget it. Too personal.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, you want to?
It's like my brother told me, he goes, when I first turned 60, he goes, yeah, you're 60, but next year you're going to be in your 60s.
Yeah, nice brother.
Yeah.
Well, the beautiful thing about a city like Chicago, second to New York, well, technically it's the third largest city, but for things like this, Chicago was second to New York. It had an interesting like judo. Chicago was big with the judo in the 60s for sure, judo schools. And, Chicago was big for shooting pool. I regret not being born in Chicago. I mean, God, all the things I like, was here. But, it's people like you and Joe that make Chicago what it is. It's the Chicagoans, the true blue people that I thrive to be around, because there is a lot of similarities between Clevelanders and Chicagoans. Joe knows that. You've never been to Cleveland, Dan, but Joe went with me, and and I love that, the personable, and you have a sense of history, and you guys, even though I know you have a love-hate relationship, both of you guys sometimes with Chicago, but I know you guys deep down love it, or at
Yes.
least love the Chicago you were raised that era.
Yes. I don't love a lot of the things that it's evolved to, but yes, overall, I've like you said, the history is like second to none in many, many ways. I mean, there's just, every day I seem to find out about, well, this happened in Chicago, that happened. I mean, look at what everybody found. I don't know whether you're in the city, but remember when the city flooded from them busting a hole in the,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I was there.
I mean, and nobody really realized about all those tunnels that were there that used to bring the coal into the city. And those things, I think they run all the way to Cicero. The tunnels that's where they actually would put them in there and they come in that way. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things you find out about that I never realized. I mean, just like where I used to work at, and you can attest to it, is literally 2 blocks down is the headquarters for the Chicago Outlaws.
Yeah, with their bulletproof shit and their cages and
Yeah, they got a big plate that's in front of the door, so as soon as you walk out, they can't nail you when you first walk out.
Yeah, just a couple blocks from police, sheriff's headquarters.
Yeah, I used to work out of the warehouse, but yeah, yep, it was literally 2 blocks from where we were.
Yeah, it is amazing. And there's probably things about Chicago that we don't even have a clue yet.
Mm-mm.
Yep. And that's like Cleveland. There's things I know a lot about Cleveland, but there's probably a lot that it's lost history. I know there's an underground Cleveland. There's a city beneath the city of downtown Cleveland. That's a known fact. Yeah, a lot of people don't know. I've never been there, but I saw it when I lived in Cleveland on TV. And of course, we have the mines underneath Lake Erie, salt mines. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And you know what's ironic? They have vehicles down there, motor vehicles, not a speck of rust. You bring those vehicles up to our atmosphere, they'll rust out.
Huh.
Yeah, but yeah, because it's deep mines underneath Lake Erie to get the salt. I would assume Chicago has something like that with Michigan, because Lake Michigan, because you got Morton Salt down there, Joe.
Yeah, it's good. I know about the Cleveland ones, actually. That's kind of amazing because they're huge. And like they do tours of them, I think. Yeah, it's kind of an amazing And it just, yeah, it's kind of amazing that it actually works because they are under the lake, right? Or they,
It's under the lake. It's completely under Lake Erie and deeper under Lake Erie. There, Cleveland geographically is set up even nicer than Chicago, and we never did anything with the lake. I think they're trying to change things now, but it would take hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion, to develop anything like Chicago has. And Cleveland is literally capable of doing it because of the way it sits geographically. Although Chicago is larger square miles than Cleveland. Okay, Cleveland's like 78 square miles, but we were denser than Chicago. Okay, at the time, not any longer. But at one point, Cleveland had a little over 1 million people. When I was a kid, it was already they were leaving. There was about between 750 and 775,000, but in a small little area. Now, when you factor in everything else, the surrounding hoods and shit, we had well over 3 million people. So it was a large town in that sense. So when I moved to Chicago, it was not a big, it was the same to me as living in Cleveland. Okay. But I wish Cleveland would do so. I love Cleveland. I'll always feel that I'm a Clevelander. If the doctors told me, Tony, you got 1 week to live, well, I'm going to Cleveland. I'll die in Cleveland, if I know what's coming. I mean, that's how I feel. I just love the town. Everything I have is because of Cleveland. My knowledge and shit, basically. But Joe, you got any closing thoughts? Because we've been going for a long time.
yeah, over 90 minutes, but it's been a lot of interesting stuff.
Good one. We could have to have him on again.
Absolutely. And I know, I've met Dan before, but never really got to know him, and talk about his life and his things. So this has really been a good opportunity to really get to meet you, actually. So that was cool.
Yeah, Dan, the thing is, Joe, when you don't really know Dan, that's when you really like him.
Yeah. Hey, one quick thing you were mentioning about Cleveland. I remember I was watching some cooking show, and they were talked about this one place there. I forget the name, but you would probably remember it. They said it is the best place for gyros.
Well, I don't know about that, but for the corned beef, the Slimans, I don't know about gyros. Do you, Joe?
No.
You said it was
Whatever.
yours. What about the place you're talking about? What was the name of it?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Slimans?
I think that was it.
Yeah. They make the roast beef, the corned beef.
Okay. I'm mixed up then because I remember
it's literally probably almost 12 inches high. It's just amazing. When I took Joe there, because of scheduling, we couldn't get there because they close early. They close early, but they're open early. There's literally lines to get in the joint, like Johnny's Beef. And this is a lot more expensive than Johnny's Beef, man. It's like $15-16 because we're talking about corned beef here. Rubens and shit too. It's an amazing place. But Cleveland is known for their corned beef, chili dogs. Where else? Chicago has their,
Chef Boyardee.
Well, he was from Cleveland.
Yes.
Yeah. He was born in Italy or something, but whatever. But he made his thing in Cleveland. You bet. Currently, I can't believe you knew that. Yeah, and there's something else Cleveland was known for food wise, and right now I'm not. It's not coming to me, but a lot of ethnic foods. But no, this has been a great podcast, Joe. What do you think, huh?
No, it really was a lot of fun. Very interesting. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the talks about the chef work and the Tang Soo dough. That's very interesting. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's worked to train that style, so that's cool to hear about it. Definitely.
Yeah, the only thing that I hate with a lot of the Korean styles and the practitioners is they get blinded and they figure that this is the best. This is the best style. And I remember my instructor, he told me one thing that I really took heart to. And I truly believe it. He said, there are no superior styles, only superior performers. And I truly believe that, because I mean, you could take judo and you could be I mean, look at judo Gene LaBelle. That's all he ever did. But believe me, you wouldn't want to touch that guy in a fight. I mean, I think he's passed now, but I mean, in his prime, that guy was just unbelievably dangerous. But he was, you know, it wasn't because the art was so superior, it's because he was superior. Just for example.
Yeah. How is your instructor, Rick? How's he doing?
He's all right. He's hanging in there. He's working now. He doesn't want to have to work, but you know, what are you gonna do? He's got
He's a
issues.
good
but
man.
he's-
Hi, Rick. If you're going to watch this, how you doing, Rick?
Yeah,
Hope I get to see you this year.
yeah.
Is he on the south side?
Yes and no. He's in Pilsen, which is 18th Street and, you know, Ashland, around there.
Yeah.
And that's an ironic thing about it. That's where I did all my training when I trained with him. I would 99% of the time I went by him, and that was in, you know, that area.
Was it Hispanic back then too?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. And it, you know, it's, I hate to say it, but it's a shitty area. It was a shitty area then. It's a shitty area now. A lot of it is, there are a lot of yuppies that are moving in, but there's still a lot of shitty areas, unfortunately. But it's just the way of the world.
Yeah, it was rough over there. I didn't really have a reason to go to Pilsen. I mean, I'm sure I've driven through there, but I don't believe I've ever gone there, let's say, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever had to do anything over there. But no, everybody, no, this was it, man. You got to meet two of the best Goombas you'll ever meet. Yes, Dan is half Italian, which means he's not Italian. I hate to say it.
No,
and
I can
Joe-
never be made, right?
yeah, right. Well, the way the world is going, who knows anymore? We can't even talk about that stuff.
No,
Although,
I'm just saying.
Yeah. Although, you know, Joey the Clown got caught 2 blocks from where we lived, I think it was, or 3.
Yep.
I mean, we were in the heart of it all, man. Some of these, you know, organized crime members were our neighbors and were our, you know, associates. You can't, you know, it's like, you know people, you know, we get around, we know people. What are you going to say, you know? But no, it was great having you on, and we got to have you back, you know, and you know, for sure. And, you know, we got to hook up again, Dan. Dan stopped over the house last week, so it was great to see him. I hadn't seen him in a long time, probably since your marriage, since your wedding.
I think so. I think that was the last time, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, after my surgery and I heal up, I'll try to head out to Yorkville where you're at, and then see you. Got to make sure I have my passport together.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually, I got to get a passport, man. I haven't had one in years. I got to get one.
Just don't tell anybody who you are, because everybody in my neighborhood, if I say, if you see Tony Cecchine, don't let him come.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, most of the women I date say the same thing. Oh, you're Tony Cecchine, or you ain't coming. I'm like, okay. Anyway.
How does she know?
Yeah, right. Well, I faked it anyway. But Joe, you don't have those problems. Not with that face of yours, man. Women literally faint in your presence. You know that's happened. He's caused more concussions without even throwing a punch than anybody in the world. They fall and hit their heads. I mean, be honest. Don't be shy, Joe.
I lost my mic. Can you guys hear me?
Anyway, we're gonna wrap it up, everybody. Thanks again for watching. And if you can come out to those seminars in March, I'll be there with bells on and maybe a bandage, but I'll be there. And thanks, Joe, and thank you, Dan.
You.
We'll see you.
Thanks, Joe.
Bye, guys.
Bye.